All right, Pez fans, thank you for joining us. Live in studio with me today is the voice of cycling, as pretty much anyone who's been watching cycling knows it, the legendary Phil Liggett. Phil, it's a pleasure to have you back in studio. Thanks for joining us. We got a few interesting things to talk about today.
Hey, it's been a while since I last saw you, Richard, but you're looking very well, and I read your stuff every time you send it to me. I've got to tell you, it goes in the spam folder. Don't ask me why. I've got to pull it out every time.
Oh, all right. Well, we'll have to work on it. We'll work on that offline. But all right. Well, we got some good things to talk about. So let's get started.
Yeah.
You and I, Phil, have known each other for like a long time. In fact, the proof is behind me. You and I first met at the 1990 Tour de France, right here.
Gosh.
On the slopes of Mont Blanc. We were near Megève. I think the stage was finishing in Megève. You were covering the tour for ABC Sports.
Simon now, he's just completed his 10th day in the Tour de France. How are you feeling, Richard?
I'm feeling pretty good, to tell you the truth, Phil.
I thought you'd have cleaned your bike.
Well, I found that with the thicker tires and a little heavier frame, I was able to take a few shortcuts, which some of the officials didn't see yet. So I've managed to stay up on GC. And
Yeah, but listen, the race finished 3.5 hours ago. These shortcuts don't work too well.
Well, I'll say this much, there's still a lot of good-looking girls at the top, and that's what counts.
Bloody hell. That's amazing.
Yeah. Your co-commentator was Sam Posey.
Yeah.
And
wonderful Sam Posey. Yeah. Always wrote his in a pencil, by the way, Rich. Used the back of the rubber on the pencil and then wrote in brilliant handwriting again. And he read those scripts when he did the shows, yeah.
And that was, of course, long before devices like this, where we're doing everything on that, and probably even before mechanical pencils.
But not far off. I remember that we had to wait up to 2 hours for a transfer, a collect call, you call it, to England to write my story. So you have to write your story and go and book your time and sit there until they gave you the call. The Colombian journalists who were alive when Parra and Herrera came on the scene, Herrera rather, they used to go in coin boxes with a sack full of coins and pump them into the coin box so they didn't drop the line, because they were live to Bogota and running the commercials as well with handheld cassettes down the telephone in the coin box. Unbelievable scenes they were in those days.
I'm interested in hearing more about that. I've been to a few tours covering it as press. I've been to a few more as a fan. I've seen the modern press rooms and now how everything is completely wired for internet. It's a room full of guys on their laptops, editing video, writing stories, and sending them out over high-speed internet to the world. But back then in 1990, the internet didn't exist. What was your sort of flow of the day like as a journalist covering the tour back then?
They were very difficult. I mean, when I worked away from the tour, because sometimes I was voicing over from London or something like that, I mean, nobody would send you a start list of riders. You had to find it because it wasn't on the internet. And, you know, I get these grubby lists come over from somewhere in France after pleading with the organisation, please send me a list of the riders. And that would apply to all the classic races as well as the Tour de France. And you when you got the film to voice from the Tour de France or Liège-Bastogne-Liège or the Tour de Flanders, there's no script with them at all. You're just looking at riders with muddy faces. You haven't a clue who they are because you can't see numbers, and you've kind of hacked your way through to life to get a start list from somewhere. They were tough, but we never thought about it. That was the way it was. I mean, I researched as best I could. Now, of course, I've got my own slick results service, and then you've got other fantastic results services on the net. Life is a dream now compared to what it was in the old days.
Well, what was it like filing stories back then? So, you know, we didn't have digital anything. So you guys would record something on, I presume it would be tape. And what would be the workflow of getting that piece of information back to headquarters and out to the world?
Well, in the 90s, was when I first met you, Greg LeMond was winning that tour, wasn't he, in 1990? I had my fingers in a lot of pies. First of all, I was a journalist, so I was writing a full story on the race every day. I was a TV commentator, so I had to find the stories out a bit more difficult. I'd seen the action, but I couldn't get to the riders to get the quotes because I was bolted to the commentary box. I had Paul Sherwen with me then. Paul joined me in '86 and trained him up. And so when I worked with CBS, which would have been soon after that, CBS and John Test came on board and Sam and Al Troutwig and all the big guys. So I had the privilege of a helicopter. And sometimes CBS, because of the voicing I was doing for CBS away from the race, they would send a helicopter to the top of the mountain. And I would jump in the helicopter. Paul would battle his way down the mountains to the Holiday Inn at the bottom of the Alps or somewhere. He'd arrive 3 hours after me. I would write my story in the helicopter because I'd fly off and get to the hotel within inside 10 minutes because I would go straight into voicing and writing scripts for the CBS show. And then I would write my story, but then I didn't have the time to read it. So when Paul comes screeching down the mountain about an hour and a half later, I left my story for him to telephone to London on a transfer charge call and spell every word because these guys were on a typewriter back in England. T-H-E, and that's what you would do. It was a real battle. So, yeah, you get the stories to the press, but they were difficult, to say the least. But we didn't see them as difficult. That was life in that day, and we just got the job done and we worked around it. I made friends with the telephonists on the Tour de France, and they always saw me coming over. Oh, Monsieur Liggett, come to me, and oh, your French is getting very good now, and we'll get your call as quick as we can. They were very nice, very helpful.
Can you tell us about a day in the life of what you were doing covering the Tour back then?
Yes, I would obviously get to the race early on, and then in those days we didn't cover the days necessarily live every day. So we would start in front of the riders from the start village, or wherever the town was. And they blew a whistle. I don't know if they still do, because I haven't been to the start of a stage of the Tour de France for 20 years now, but they used to blow a whistle and then you ran. It was like a Le Mans start. You would run for your car and you had to be out and clear before Felix Leviton, as it was then, and Jean-Marie Leblanc after that, who would start the process of coming out on the neutralised leg. We would jump in the car and go, and it was like being in a car race. The whole line of press cars. Some of the press drivers employed rally drivers because they were great drivers, and at times you had to drive very quickly. And we were linked by radio, of course, but we were able to stay on the same course as the race and drive about a kilometre ahead of the race. And then they would start screaming at you. You couldn't speak to them, but they could speak to you, and they would tell you to accelerate, to go faster. They were very good at telling you what was happening in the race. And then when we got to within a few hours of the finish, I tended to put my foot down and make 2 hours on the race so I could get into the commentary box and then put the headphones on and start to pick up the actual race report. It went a bit pear-shaped in the 80s when we had the Women's Tour de France riding just ahead of the men's race. So we used to catch those, and then the gendarmes wouldn't let us pass the women. There was actually one day I missed my TV show for English television because the police would not let us go past the women's race. And that was partly why that race collapsed, and it's not practicable to run a women's race some 4 hours ahead of the Tour de France, because you've also got the caravan to contend with. That was a nightmare.
Phil, I want to talk to you about this thing that I saw on the internet where Phil Liggett says goodbye to cycling commentary. I saw this and I was like, what is going on? And then you and I had a conversation about this, and it was like, turns out the information it's fake news.
It's misinterpreted news, actually, because the presenter asked the question, this is your 16th Olympics, is it your last one? And I said, well, I guess it is. I'll be nearly 85, I might even be 85 in the dates in Los Angeles. I said, I think I don't want to bore the public too long. So, yeah, this is my last games. And everybody around the world took it that I just resigned my whole career. I was rather surprised NBC never rang me up to say, what are you talking about?
You're not stopping commentating. You will be back. You're going to continue commentating. We're going to see you, and we can rely on this for a while.
I just won't. I think it's unreasonable to think I'll be working in the next Olympic Games in 2028. I think that's pushing my life a bit
Good.
long. I know that NBC want me to stay as long as I can with them, and so let's just say next year's a certainty. After that, we'll make another decision. I just don't know. I mean, it'll break my heart when I have to say it's all over, believe me. Well, I can't tell you how many mails I got and tweets or whatever they call them these days. I got phone calls from around the world from television networks saying, could they have the story? Could they send a camera crew to my home? I said, guys, slow down. I'm not retiring. I said, I'm just not going to do the next Olympic Games in 4 years' time.
I'm glad to hear that. In fact, this might even be my YouTube attention-grabbing headline. Phil Liggett not retiring.
Oh, boy.
You know, when I really think about the voice of cycling, for sure, it's always been Phil Liggett. That is you're it. Honestly, Phil, as a guy working actively in a field he loves and is so good at, well into his 80s. I mean, this is fantastic. It's like you are an inspiration, I would say, and you're certainly an inspiration to me because I've been doing Pez now for 22, coming up on 23 years. At this point, I think it's too late for me to do anything else. So it's a good thing I'm doing something I like because this is probably what I'll be doing for the rest of my life.
Well, yeah. I didn't set out to make it a lifetime, but I became a journalist in 1967. I was already doing little bits and pieces for local newspapers near Liverpool. And I used those cuttings to get the job as a journalist, which I did with Cycling Weekly. And I must confess that I didn't think I'd be working this late into life, but I don't feel my age. I'm multi-active. I mean, ride my bike, walk miles, do everything, and I'm very lucky.
Thank you so much for speaking with us. It's been a pleasure, as always, to get back in touch and just kind of updated on what's going on from your perspective. What can we look forward from you in the coming weeks or months? I know we're heading into the off season now, but what are you looking forward to?
Well, I'll still be obviously watching television, but I won't be commentating anymore this year unless something comes out of the blue. I swing at this time of the year more to my projects in Africa, where I'm very involved in saving the rhino from extinction and the poachers, and I also do help some of the people from the local tribes there as well, which I look forward to very much. So from November and December, that's what I do. Come January, it's a new year, and I usually start it and will be doing it again next year in the Tour Down Under and the Cadell Evans Road Race. Then I'll flip back to Africa, carry on there, then I'll flip back to Paris-Roubaix, and as long as my health holds out, I'll be back on my 54th Tour de France.
Awesome. Well, I can speak for not only myself, but I'm sure millions of fans everywhere that we're all looking forward to it. Seeing you back. All right, Phil, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you.